Welcome to the Dog's Way Podcast, episode 85. In today's episode, our second installment of our 2020 COVID-19 virus Home Alone Challenge. I've got some puppy foundational skills homework for you guys, especially for you guys with puppies, but I think you guys with adult dogs might find that some of these exercises might help you out as well. I'll be right back.
Welcome to the Dog's Way Podcast, where we solve dog problems by training people. Because, let's face it, your dog couldn't possibly download this podcast on their own. And now your host, here he is, Sean McDaniel.
Thank you, John Melly, for that introduction, and welcome to the Dog's Way Podcast, episode 85. As you heard in the introduction, we've got some homework for foundational skills of socialization for you guys today. And I'm jumping into this because I got just a ton of messages from you guys that are home alone, socially distancing, sheltering in place with a little puppy that's under like 6.5 months old. And you've heard you got to get out and socialize them a lot. And so good on you for wondering how you're going to socialize your puppy during social distancing rules being in place. Well, what I've got for you is some homework that will set you up to be right on track when those social distancing rules get lifted. And we're more like China and South Korea are right now, where they're kind of getting more back to normal. And in a few weeks, we'll be there too. So we don't want to just wait around. We want to build up some of those foundational core skills that your puppy or your dog needs for being good at being kind of socialized and being in environments that are new to them. So we're going to talk about that today, give you guys some puppy homework, as well as some of you guys with adult dogs. I think you're going to find that these exercises might be helpful for you too around the house in establishing some basic rules like don't chase the kids when they run down the hall or across the yard. So let's jump into our foundational core skill building for socializing. For those of you who are new to the podcast, one little fair warning I'll give you is that it's important to me that you guys understand the whys behind what we're doing. And my hallucination is that if you understand the whys behind what we're doing, then you'll be more consistent with your dog, and dogs thrive on consistency. So that's why I'm going to go through some of these basic foundational theory components, so you'll have a really good sense of why we're doing some of these exercises. So what are we going to do? What are core foundational skills in socializing? Well, to give you some context, I think about socializing in 3 different categories: socializing to things, socializing to people, and socializing to other dogs or animals. I usually think about those 3 categories in socializing because it's sort of an upgrade in degree of difficulty each time you go to the next step, right? Socializing to things is a little bit easier than socializing to people. Socializing to people is a little bit easier than socializing to other dogs and animals. And that can be measured by a few things, measured by how interested your puppy or your dog is to those things, how fast moving the equation is when some change happens in the environment relative to other dogs or animals, relative to people, or relative to things. So really what we're going to work on is that first step in socializing to things, and we're going to use things to depict changes in the environment. And we're going to teach our puppy a couple of lessons, a couple of core skills about how to handle changes in our environment. Because really, if you think about what socializing is, a well-socialized dog is a dog that can go out into the world and handle changes in their environment. You could think of a dog being able to recover from stimuli. There's more to it than that, obviously, but that's the foundational core skill that we really want to build in any dog. If you've ever heard about puppy aptitude testing, that's 2 of the things. They test a lot of things in puppy aptitude tests, but that's 2 of the things they're looking for in the sight startle sensitivity and sound startle sensitivity assessment that they do at 7 weeks with puppies out of a litter. You take a puppy out of a litter, you pop an umbrella open in their face to see what their sight startle sensitivity is. Every puppy that can see gets startled by that umbrella popping open in their face. But the question is, what do they do after they get startled visually? Some puppies attack the umbrella. Other puppies run for the hills and hide under the coffee table. Other puppies get startled, immediately settle, sniff their way up to the umbrella, sniff the umbrella, look back at the assessor and kind of go, okay, what's next? What are we doing now? And that's the ideal that we want in a puppy that we're going to take home with us, depending on what kind of job description you're looking for. If you're looking for a patrol dog candidate, you might want a puppy that's a little down that spectrum, a little closer to that, hey, maybe I'll just take the umbrella out and ask questions later kind of tendency in their sort of genetically predisposed personality traits. But the reason I point that out is that that's one of the things we're really going to kind of be doing today. We're going to take that sight startle sensitivity assessment or sound startle sensitivity assessment, and we're going to put that to work in changing the environment to teach our puppy that foundational core skill of socialization, which is manage your nervous system, recover from stimuli, get back to neutral so you can get into an investigation mode and a thinking mode as opposed to just a sympathetic nervous system response reaction mode. And then the second core skill that we want to teach in our homework sessions today is we want to teach that ability to kind of stay mentally connected to you. You can sort of imagine if your dog had the two skills of being able to recover from stimuli, in other words, handle changes in their environment well, to be able to govern their nervous system when something changed in their environment, and to stay mentally connected to you regardless of what was around them. And I don't mean kind of that artificial watch me exercise and eyeball me the whole time. I mean kind of a more organic connection to you. Just kind of checking in with you and interpreting the world through you, trying to see how you react to things in a kind of a way that a kid does in a family. They kind of look to see what their parents do about this thing that just changed. If their parents start freaking out or overreacting, then the kid starts freaking out and overreacting. And so we want that kind of more organic mental connection with you and not that super artificial competition, obedience, eyeballs locked on me type sit. It's just an organic mental awareness of me and connection to me. So we're going to go through an exercise today of creating transitions and teaching those two core skills. But this exercise is going to manifest a little bit differently depending on the personality of your puppy or your dog. And I kind of alluded to that already in the sight startle and sound startle sensitivity test description in that puppy aptitude test, right? Where a puppy might have a tendency to just take off, forget it. That aluminum pan dropped on the kitchen floor. I'm not going to go anywhere near that thing. I'm going to be under the coffee table in the living room. I'll see you later. Or they might go, hey, aluminum pan just dropped on the floor. I'm going to attack it. Let's just attack that and ask questions later. The exercise that we do is going to manifest really differently in both of those different sort of personality type reactions to the change that we create. So let's talk about our setup, and then I'll walk you through each of those versions of the exercise. So our setup, our puppy's going to be on a leash and a collar. I use a martingale collar with puppies. It's that looks like a flat collar, but it's kind of partially constrictive, so a puppy can't slide out of that collar like they do with a flat collar sometimes. So we've got our puppy on a leash and collar. We've got a bag of food. If they're really food motivated, you can just use their regular kibble, their regular food. If they're not as food motivated, you might have to develop some sort of high value treat. The best, most available high value treat that I can recommend to you is some hot dogs. Some of those pre-cooked hot dogs, you cut them up into little tiny 1/8-inch pieces and you have yourself a pretty high value treat that's fairly affordable. So we've got our setup, we've got our puppy on leash, we've got our food. And if you're new to the podcast too, and you haven't listened to the 2 episodes I did on conditioning, you might want to go back and listen to that. I forget what episodes those are. It's in the 70s somewhere, but you can just scroll down on whatever you're listening to this in, and you can see the 2-part podcast that I did on conditioning. And that'll give you a really good kind of primer and background on conditioning as well. But I'll try to give you some of the Cliff's Notes on conditioning as we're walking through this. One of the things you want to be aware of is you want to be aware of a verbal marker and then rewarding with your food. The verbal marker is there to identify the behavior right when it happens. It's kind of like a verbal clicker. If you've seen somebody do clicker training with dogs, we're kind of using a verbal marker. The reason I don't use a clicker generally with dogs is that if that's our one way, if that's our auditory signal to identify when a puppy or a dog's done something right, you literally have to walk around with that clicker taped to the palm of your hand because you miss a lot of teachable moments throughout the day because puppies and dogs learn all day long. And so if they do something exactly how I want them to do it, I want to be able to say, good, and give them a pet as a reinforcement. Usually with adult dogs, I use positive social contact, positive physical contact as reward. Sometimes with special behavioral modification things or kind of tuning something up, we can use food. I don't usually rely on food as a primary training tool with adult dogs, just to give you a background on me really quickly. With puppies, I use it all the time. If you want to know more about why I do that, you can go back and listen to the earlier episodes of the podcast. But let's jump into the 2 versions of our exercise today. So you're going to create a change in the environment. you're going to create some kind of stimulation. Now, this is sort of limited only by your creativity, but we also want to think principally about this too. This isn't just any change. This isn't just any change at any level. This is a change at what I would call kind of a minimum threshold level. So what I mean by that is it's going to be a little bit startling. It's going to be noticeable to our puppy, but it's not going to be so startling and so noticeable that any puppy or any dog is just going to run for the hills, right? I don't want to throw a bunch of firecrackers into the middle of the living room and go, hey, everything's fine. Don't worry about it. That's overshooting minimum threshold. So we want to be able to adjust this distraction level, this distraction item that we're using to create the change for our core skill building. And so it's worth knowing a little bit about some distraction theory. Those of you who have been listening to the podcast know all about this, but for those of you who are new, we want to know about the 3 things that make any object of distraction more or less severe. If you change the distance, the movement, or the surprise as elements of any given object of distraction, then that object of distraction becomes more or less severe. There's kind of a 4th rule of distractions as well, and that's number. So the example of that is like a bucket of tennis balls is more distracting than 1 tennis ball. A bunch of kids trying to pet your puppy all at once, more distracting than 1 kid trying to pet your puppy at once. But if you just take any given object of distraction, we can adjust the elements of distance, movement, or surprise of that object of distraction to make it more or less severe. The reason I want you guys to know about that is that's exactly what we're going to adjust to figure out what that minimum threshold level is. And then that's what we're going to adjust once your puppy gets used to that to kind of turn up the challenge just a little bit so that you can create a little more startle, a little more change, a little more surprise, and you can have your puppy then, or your adult dog, if they're still working on this kind of stuff, react to that in sort of a minimum threshold way, and we can coach them through it. So you can sort of use whatever you want to create change, except for a few things. I wouldn't use their favorite fetching ball or their favorite fetching toy right now. I wouldn't use things they're really not allowed to have, like slippers and shoes and TV remote controls and your backpack or your purse, so that we're not trying to unteach a rule later. Because if a puppy's shy and we're teaching them, hey, let's go up and investigate that thing, and they go, hey, that's pretty cool, I think I'll just go over and start gnawing on that purse. And then you go, no, leave it. And all of a sudden they're like, man, I thought you wanted me to go up to this thing. So we can use magazines, broom handles, crumpled up pieces of paper. We can use sticks outside. We can use pine cones. We can use all kinds of stuff that would be kind of normally okay for a puppy to investigate or a dog to investigate and maybe kind of get into just a little bit. When you get into the kind of the higher levels of distraction, you can kind of use a garbage can lid. You can bump your garbage can outside. You can tip an empty garbage can over. You can tip over a broom. You can drop a small piece of wood from your wood shop. You can drop a log on the ground. You can do all kinds of stuff that creates change. Inside, you can drop a handful of spoons on the floor. Anything that's going to create some element of a change in distance, movement, or surprise. It's going to be mildly startling, and we want to just see how our puppy's going to react to that. So let me go through the 2 different versions of that. If your puppy has that personality of like, let's get out of here, then we're going to do the version of the exercise where we sort of entice our puppy to kind of encourage them to work their way up to it and start to investigate. So here's what that's going to look like. Let's say we've got a couple of spoons and we're going to drop on our linoleum floor in our kitchen, and we want to kind of surprise our puppy a little bit. We've got it in our back pocket. We're walking around with our puppy. Maybe we're doing a little bit of follow me exercise or something like that. Maybe doing a couple of sits or whatever you know how to do. And then all of a sudden you kind of toss them around your back and those spoons hit the ground and go clang. And your puppy gets a little bit startled and they go, geez, that was kind of scary. I think I'm just going to go hang out in the living room. See ya. As soon as they get to the end of that leash, the full length of the leash, I'm going to create a little bit of a soft boundary. I'm going to crouch down or go down on a knee or sit down on the floor, and I'm going to turn my side to the puppy. Side turning, anything that's not forward facing, is kind of friendlier and more inviting. With really startled puppies, you might even turn your back on your puppy. And then what I want you to do is pick up a spoon and kind of move it around a little bit. Kind of move it around on the floor, push it around, pick one up, sniff it, put it back down, and then just kind of sit there and leave the spoons alone and see if your puppy is going to come over to you. If your puppy comes over to you, give them a couple of treats, pet them up, hang out with them just a little bit, and see if they'll move towards those spoons to check out what they were. If they move a little bit closer to the spoon, say, good. That's our verbal marker. I say good. You can say yes. You can say pomegranate if you want to, but just something that's the same word every time that's going to mark the behavior right when it happens. So if your puppy moves towards that, kind of slinks up to that spoon and stretches their head and neck and nose out to sniff that spoon, as soon as they do that, their nostrils flare to see if they can get a scent of it. You say, good. And then you give them a little treat. You make a little bowl under their mouth, have that treat in the middle of the palm of your hand so they can learn to take that treat softly from you as opposed to trying to snap at it with the treat in between your thumb and index finger. And then you just hang out and wait to see if they're going to investigate a little bit more, see if they're going to actually sniff right up and contact that spoon. If they do, you say good and give them a treat. If they're not willing to go all the way up to it, then you can reward the approximation of the behavior. You got it like a foot closer. Good job. Way to be brave. Good. Give them the treat. And then we walk away from that. Do a couple other things. Maybe play with a little fetch ball that they like, or maybe do a couple of sits that they know. Just do something away from where the spoons are. And then you can come back over and try it again. Pick up the spoons, put them in your back pocket, do a few other things, have a couple minutes go by, and then drop those spoons again and see what happens. You can work on that same object of distraction for 2 or 3, 4 times in a row, and then maybe change it up again. We don't want to drill this over and over and over again. It's better, since you're home alone with your puppy, to do little 5 to 6 to 7 minute training sessions throughout the day. Maybe do 3 or 4 repetitions of a mild startle. And what I would call kind of this version of this is sort of be brave training. Go into investigation mode. Entice them up by getting smaller, going down on a knee, turning your side to them, encouraging them to come up. You handle the object a little bit, sniff at it, put it back down on the ground. And if they go up and they start to investigate it too, you mark and reinforce that. So that's kind of the be brave version of this exercise. For those puppies that are a little more animated, they're a little more like, hey, if something moves, I think I'll just chase it, tackle it, bite it, do something with it, and you do whatever you want. I'm on my own. I'm going to go do that thing. This becomes a little bit different exercise. So if you drop something on the ground, crumpled up piece of paper or those spoons, and your puppy goes, whoa, those are bouncing across the floor, I'm going to go get them. You clap your hands. You have to, with puppies, you have to really do kind of a tap dance. Clapping your hands, tapping your leg, making clucking sounds, calling pup, 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 or calling your puppy's name if they really know their name. This isn't calling them back. This isn't a leave it command. We're not doing commands yet. We're just getting their attention by creating lots of noise over where you are and crouching down again, turning your side to your puppy and moving away and enticing or inviting them over with that posture, with that kind of friendly dog posture. When they come running back over to you, they turn around and look at you and go, whoa, you're really down at my level. I'm going to come running over to you. You say, good, and you give them a treat. Give them a couple of treats if they come over to you. And now you're going to go into what I would call an approach and retreat exercise, meaning that it's kind of a specific version of that follow me game that if you guys want to go back and listen to episode 4, I think it is in the podcast back in the early days, gives you kind of a follow me exercise with puppies. And so what you're going to do is you're just going to use the distance element of this distraction object to keep your puppy mentally connected to you. That's that second parallel goal we have in today's exercises of keeping your puppy mentally connected to you. So once they come over to you, you say good, give them a treat, pet them up a little bit, then you walk towards where those spoons are again. As soon as you see them kind of get fixated on that, oh, hey, we're going back over to the spoons, you see their eyes lock in and go, hey, I'm going to go check those things out. Do your song and dance again, call them away. Hey, pup, 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 let's go. Turn around, turn your back on your puppy, crouch down a little bit. As they come running over, you go, good, and you give them a little treat. So you want to do that 3, 4, 5 times, approach and retreat, so that they can go up and investigate that spoon or stick or garbage can lid or whatever you were using to create that distracting, semi-startling transition. And they can go up to that in more of an investigation mode, more of a neutral mode. So you can see that this is kind of, both versions of this exercise is sort of the opposite side of the same coin, right? Really what we're kind of teaching is neutrality. Go into an investigation mode. Don't have kind of this overreaction of take off and run for the hills, or don't have this overreaction of take off and run for the thing and go for it and chase it. We want them to go up, sniff the spoon, go, oh, it's just a spoon. Not that interesting. Doesn't seem like a chew toy. And then we just move on from there. So that's the version of this exercise. If you have that puppy that's a kind of a lunge first or bolt for it first and ask questions later, we want to teach that neutrality with that approach and retreat exercise and getting them to go up more at your speed, more at a neutral speed, so that they kind of have themselves a little more sort of neurologically together when they go to investigate what that thing is, instead of just that stimulus response kind of half-crazed bolting formula that they've got pre-installed in their head. So as you get the basics of either of these versions of this exercise kind of ingrained in your puppy or your adult dog, if you still have some of these kind of nervous system governing skills that you could build in your adult dog, once you get those things down, you can start building some practical rules around the house too. If you guys are home alone with your family and you have animated training distractions, otherwise known as kids, you can start to have them work into the mix too. You can have, say you have a 5-month-old puppy, you got a Labrador retriever hanging out with you at home, and they like chasing the kids down the hall. Well, this exercise is exactly how you would teach them to not chase the kids down the hall or not chase the kids across the yard. We would start with walking first. Have one of your kids walk from one side of the living room to the other side of the living room. And when your puppy goes, hey, they're going somewhere, I'm going to go with them, you do exactly what we did in that second version of the exercise. Clap your hands, tap your leg, call the puppy's name, get lower, crouch down, go down on a knee, and when your puppy comes over, you give them a couple of treats. Good. Mark that. Give them the treat when they get to you, and then let them settle for a minute or so. Don't just go have your kids go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. We want some settling time in between trials of this, because if your puppy or your dog hasn't learned the ability, this core skill of settling or recovering from stimuli, all distractions are cumulative unless they've learned to recover. So later, when they get better at this, you can have more rapid fire trials of this. But right now, give your puppy 30, 40, 50, 60 seconds to settle. And then you can call your training assistant in again and go, okay, now walk the other way across the living room. And they just walk across the living room, and your puppy kind of goes, oh, wait, I'm going to go. No, wait, I'm not. And they check back in with you visually, and you go, good. And you give them a couple of treats. And then as you ramp that up slowly over maybe a couple, 3 sessions or maybe a couple of days, you might get to having your kids jog past your puppy, and your puppy goes, oh man, that looks kind of enticing, but you know what? I think maybe I'll stick with you. And you go, good, and give them a couple of treats. The other thing you can do as pre-socialization work in surprise and actually meeting and greeting people is you can have your family members dress up in different coats and different hats and put on glasses, and they can look like different people. So you can also have your shyer puppy work their way up to somebody in the family that's, living with you, sheltering at home with you right now. And you can have them be brave and work their way up to the person in the weird coat or the weird hat, just like they did with the spoons or those distraction objects that you were working on that skill of being brave and going into investigation mode. Which then leads us up to that other core skill of being able to accept petting without nibbling and nipping and losing their mind. And so for that skill, I would encourage you guys just to go back and listen to, if you haven't listened to it already, listen to podcast 83. There's a whole episode on teaching your puppy not to bite and accept petting. Handling exercises is what we call it. And there's lots of permutations of that. So that's the other thing to work on while you're kind of working on these core foundational skills of socializing. Well, we can't go out and meet new person after new person after new person on a daily basis while we have our social distancing rules in place right now. So that's your mission, should you choose to accept it. Setting up your puppy with some surprises and some changes in their environment at a minimum threshold level to teach them to either be brave and go into investigation mode on the one side of the ledger, or to be less reactive to that change and less boisterous about reacting to that change in favor of staying mentally connected to you. And then on top of that, go check out podcast 83 and work on some of those handling exercises. There's tons of permutations in there for you guys to sort of work up to in those handling exercises. Lots of stuff to do with that. And then in tomorrow's episode, what I'll do is I'll give you guys some ideas about how to mentally and physically kind of stimulate your dog, give them a little bit of mental exercise, a little bit of physical exercise. So I really appreciate you letting me hang out with you for a little bit today. And hopefully these exercises help you teach your puppy how to manage their nervous system better while they experience a change in their environment. And in some senses, that skill is really analogous to a pretty good human quality that we're all getting a chance to practice right now. That's that human psychological ability or skill of resilience. I know I ended yesterday's podcast kind of alluding to that Friedrich Nietzsche idea that what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, kind of alluding to that resilience idea. And I thought as I was kind of preparing the podcast today for you guys, at the risk of being a little bit cheesy, I thought what I'd do is just end each of these special podcasts with a thought or a quote about resilience. And this thought is from Helen Keller. Character cannot be developed in ease and quiet. Only through experience of trial and suffering can the soul be strengthened, ambition inspired, and success achieved. So I think we've all got a pretty big opportunity right now to do a little psychological and emotional weightlifting, build our ability to be more resilient. It's really impressive to hear and see all these stories around the country of people being resilient, banding together, developing our resiliency as an individual, as a neighborhood, as a community, as a state, as a country, and as a family of countries. So I appreciate you letting me hang out with you a little bit today. Hopefully this gives you some homework to work on with your dog. And I'll be back tomorrow with some more ideas about how to burn up a little mental and physical energy with your dog while you're hanging out at home as well. So there you go. Till I talk to you in podcast 86, go have some fun with your dog. I'll talk to you next time.